I just make a couple of comments शुरू करने से पहले. वो ये है कि मैं I'm not a scholar of any urban matters at all. So I'm choosing to actually narrate a personal story which is अभी मैंने अपनी बेटी से एक लफ्ज़ सीखा है intersectional. So it intersects a number of things, but so it's very incidentally about democracy, technology, city, some personal experiences, etc. ये स्टोरी असल में मैंने बहुत कम लोगों जानते हैं, तो everybody knows this in bits and pieces, but I thought that there's been enough time spent, passed before it could be said, so I'm trying to compact it as much as is possible and tell you the story. The story is essentially of a small network that I ran for about 7 to 8 years. And what happened was that I'm a ham radio operator, so for those people who do not know कि ham radio क्या है, मैं ये बता दूं कि वो basically you make your own radio sets and communicate with each other. और अब इस वक्त मैं ये समझता हूँ कि the whole idea of ham radio is that you are sovereign with your communication needs. कि आप किसी इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर पे डिपेंड नहीं करते कि बीच में किसी ने वायर डाला हो, कोई आपको रेगुलेट कर रहा हो यहाँ से वहाँ तक जाने के लिए. आपके पास कुछ एक इलेक्ट्रॉनिक्स का एक डब्बा होता है, उसमें आप एक वायर लगा देते हैं और दुनिया के किसी दूसरे सिरे पर there is somebody else with a. Is it all right if I speak in Hindustani or should I speak in English? Either way I can. Okay, all right. Probably I'll speak in English. Yeah. So that was the whole idea of ham radio. But what happened was that made me extremely curious about ways in which people can talk to each other using various types of technologies, right? So this is what, as a kid, I was very much interested in this. Part of my family, worked in the All India radio, so I was hanging around the radio stations for a long time, and, it was very magical that, through space, your words go out to somewhere else, etc. So anyway, but what happened was that in the early 90s, a friend of mine who is also my chartered accountant, he actually, when I went to his office, I saw that he had bought a card called Sound Blaster. तो ये PC में लगता था और उससे PC में आवाज़ आ सकती थी. You could actually play sounds. MP3s had not come in until then, right? There were no concept of MP3s, but you could record your voice, play it back, etc., etc. So it was a very interesting thing to do, and I was very fascinated with this piece of hardware. कि ये क्या है? You can actually add a mic to the PC, which was very unusual. Record your own voice, and it would come back to you, and you could do various things. For example, the same data, you could add it to itself and it would become an echo, and you could do a lot of things now digitally that were not possible earlier. But the main thing that I was interested in is, first thing I asked him is, do you have 2 of these? So he was curious, he said, why? I said, no, what I would like to do is, he was a stockbroker, so he had a number of computers all on a network. I said that no, between 2 PCs, I'd like to see if I can make an intercom between these 2 PCs which are connected onto your local area network. So he got another card. And then what I did is, instead of this voice being recorded on this system, I could take the voice and play it out onto the next PC. Now this is I'm saying about 10 years before Skype and all these things came in. So we got this thing going, and it was very fascinating for me to see that, we could do some sort of an intercom between 2 PCs. But Ehsan asked me, now that the internet is here, do you think that we can take this from here and take it to another computers across the city? So we tried doing that, and we found out that there wasn't enough bandwidth. These were the days of dial-up modems, so it was very difficult to get any of that going. Yeah, so and these were the initial modems of 2400 bauds. But what had happened was that around that time, there was a flourishing business of smuggling electronic equipment. In Kothi, we found that there are these modems available which could go to 9600 baud, okay, which was about 3 times the speed. But even that was very much less than the data which was being generated from this mic. The mic was generating about 128 kilobits of data per second, and you had to compress it down to 9600 bits per second. So then you say, "Acha, ab kya kare?" And this is the really early days of internet. I mean, Yahoo was the big thing there. Google hadn't, really come in until now. So we started doing, I started rather figuring out the entire internet the old way. And I found out that there's this girl called Jutta Deniger, who was in Germany, who had gone through the specifications of a new system which was coming up called the GSM, where the sound could be compressed into something which can go through the modems that we had. So I wrote to her, and she actually sent me some very sketchy stuff saying that this is possibly what you could do to compress the voice. It was called a codec, a GSM codec, and she and I started working together back and forth on emails. That was the only way we could do. And finally, I got this thing going where you could compress the voice to such an extent that it could go between 2 PCs on 2 dial-up connections. And I was really kicked with it because this was equivalent to a wireless radio, because you could actually send the voice across from one PC to another. So Ehsan used to sit in Malakpet, and in those days I was living in Journalist Colony and Banjara Hills. So it was a very interesting thing that we could do. And Ehsan's part of his family was actually in the US. And Ehsan said that, do you think that we can connect this to a telephone somehow and have people who have telephones to speak with people who are on the PCs? So it was the next logical thing to do, but we just couldn't think of anything at all of how to do it. But these modems which we had gotten and smuggled in, but by now they were available, called Boca modems. So I was actually going through the manual of this modem just to see if I can make it go faster, because somebody said that there's something called 14.4 kbps modems also, that you could do with those things. And there I found a fascinating feature of these modems, and that was called voicemail. So hum to yahan istemal nahi karte, we don't use it much in India, but voicemail is something that is very prevalent in the West, especially in the US, where you call somebody and they play a message to you, and then you record something back. So what this modem would do is, it would actually digitize the voice both ways. That is, if there is a recorded message on the PC, it will play it through this modem to the phone line saying, you have reached Farhan, I'm not here, please leave a message, pip. And then it turns back the other way, where the modem can now record the voice coming on the phone line onto the PC. So I thought that this facility can actually be used to stream live sound, instead of the sound being played from a file on the PC to the person on the other end of the phone call. If it can come through the internet, and that can go in here. So it took us a fairly long time, about 3 or 4 months, before I could figure out how this hardware itself works, which is making the software work. But at the end of it, we had a system where from one PC, you could take the voice to the second PC, and the second PC is connected through the modem onto the telephone network, from where if you dialed out somebody's number, and that person could hear the voice from this end and both ways, right? So the full duplex. So that was a really primitive technology that we had. But the point was, now somebody in the US could actually, be connected to somebody in Hyderabad. And so what we would do is, to try this out, we had Ehsan's cousin who was in Texas, and he would actually call on the PC and say, okay, you want to speak to your mom, hang on. So you dial his mom's number, connect it to the modem, say, baat ho rahi, haan. So you just keep it there, and then, they would actually talk to each other. Now in those days, calling from the US was about 25 or 30 cents per minute. So people would actually save to call up on the weekend or call once a month, etc., etc. So it was a very big thing to, be able to call. And here the calls were going for free, because many of these people were actually having free internet in the universities, etc., fewer had it at homes, even around that time, but many of them had. So this was a base technology which we were going on with. But what would happen is that the word spread among his relatives that you could actually speak to your people in India for free. And they would keep writing emails to Ehsan saying, at 5 p.m., can you join me to my mom, at so-and-so, this, that. Now my wife would like to speak to somebody, etc. So ये सब चल रहा था. So he said, yaar, ये तो बहुत गड़बड़ है, what do we do about this? It's becoming a racket. So I said, okay, I can do one thing. So we also built chat into the software which we were giving to people. So I said on chat, we'll put a special thing that if you put a slash and a phone number, the software running on the Hyderabad end of the PC will take it out as a phone number and automatically dial, because it's a modem in any case, right? So the dialing happened automatically. Then we left the phone and people would just keep dialing. Then it was almost like a PCO for them. They'd start this software at their PC and dial the number, and they would connect to everybody, etc. So, and it was just spreading among his friends group, etc. And we were very happy. All the time that phone line is busy, at his office, and it's running fairly well. When the month ended, we got a bill of about 60,000 rupees in local calls. Okay, and he said, "Yeah, it's become very horrible, and there's no way we can sustain this. What do we do about this?" And but we knew that we had a bit of a technology going here, which is very unusual and which is very critical for us. So when I was a ham and we were kids, there was a fellow Hyderabadi, probably Sanjay's classmate, or I don't know what, called Anil Raj, who was now heading Ericsson India. So I found out his address through some means, and called him. And he was very surprised. He said, after all these years, where are you guys? So I said, I've got this stuff and I want you to take a look at it. So he actually flew down to Hyderabad and he looked at it and he said that this is really big. You don't understand how big this is. And I'm coming on board. He sort of, didn't even ask us. He said, I'm coming on board. 3 of us will have to form a company and we need to do something, etc., etc., etc. So anyway, so he jumped into this, and we had this phone line which was running packed, and we were spending about 50,000 rupees on the phone bill per month, and another 10 to 15,000 rupees on internet, because in those days internet had to be paid over a certain amount. It keep charging more and more. So now we had this and we were losing money and we didn't know what to do with it. So we said we can't lose money because we don't even have that sort of money with us, right? So what we did is we set up a second phone line with exactly the same system, and we said on this is for free, okay, but there's so many people trying to call through this line about, we had no idea who were trying to call through this because there was no user ID, password, nothing into this. On the second line, what we'll do is we'll restrict the numbers which can be called. So if you pay us for those calls, we'll put your number onto that second list. And this list was basically a text file with phone numbers. So whenever a call would come in, the software would match you against that number and let the call go through that. But how do they pay is a question, because he's sitting in the US and your mom is here in Hyderabad, and how do you do this? So we said, then ask mom to pay. So we'd actually send a guy who used to work for Ehsan to all these places, and he would actually collect money every month and and allowed them to do that. But there were some people who were now calling for longer time, some people were not calling, etc. Then we had to put counters of minutes against every phone number. So we got this entire thing going. But among Hyderabadis now it became a rage. And there were a lot of people who just continuously keep trying for half an hour, 2 hours, just keep dialing these numbers. And we realized that we were running packed on both the lines, and we needed to do something more. And it had to be kept running 24/7. Yeah, so exactly. So then there was this guy called Imran who used to supply us hardware. Scantech, he's still there in Mehdipatnam. So we asked Imran, do you want to run something like this on your own? He said, what is it? So we told him, this is just a modem. You connect it to a PC, and people will call through this, and you'll be able to make some money out of this if you want. So he said, yeah, I'll do that. So we set up one system at his place. And it would take us about a day or two to set it up because, the modem doesn't work, this doesn't work, you have to have cables with this, etc., etc. But we set up one system for Imran. When the month ended, he came back and said, I want 3 more. Because, he was trying to run a full business there. So we had 4 PCs running at his place, and we had 2 PCs running here. Then people would call up and say, Arey yaar, wo Imran ke paas, his internet is not good because he's using 4 computers on one connection, the thing doesn't work, why don't you get my route to go through your system, not through his system. Imran says, the guys are not paying, so I've taken them off. So there are all sorts of stuff that we had to go and mediate between that. So we said, this is not working out, right, this way at all. And Anil said that, we cannot go around fixing stuff at Imran's place all the while. So you do something in software that we never have to go to Imran's place. You should be able to remotely fix this stuff. Best is that you make a software that does not require fixing. So I thought that's what we need to do, that we should make our node, as it was called, a node that is which connects the internet to the local telephone system, something which will work on its own. So we then, we started making this. Rather, I started doing the programming work for it. And it was very hard. So between getting something just going to demonstrate to somebody to something which, mom and pop can use. So this is standard, the grandma test. Can my grandma use it? If grandma can use it, then it works well. Otherwise, it doesn't work well. So it took us almost 6 months to make this piece of software that you just download, connect a telephone line, and your internet is connected, and you switch it on, and it should just start taking calls from callers and give it there. That was first piece. The second piece was that on our server, we had a piece which would actually distribute calls among various nodes which were running in various places. Okay, yeah. To balance out the calls. Not only balance out the calls, we would also do another thing, which is we figured out that if the line is good, then the call sustains for a long time. And if you call, you don't get the, for example, what Imran would do is on 2 lines, he wouldn't pay the bill, so the line would get disconnected. And people who would call, there's no way of knowing that the call has gone through or not. So people would hang up. So we figured out that if people hang up the call in half a minute's time, then it's not a good call. So we told Imran, we are not going to pay you for calls which last less than a minute, so you'd better get all your stuff going properly. And those lines, those phone numbers of his, which were running the calls properly, would get more calls. So we had some sort of a system in which the calls were being redistributed to the nodes which were doing well. So this went on, but still Imran had to send his people out to collect money. At that point in time, PayPal got launched. And that completely changed our thing. Now we could actually ask the callers to pay us. And we got, we opened a PayPal account and we started getting these PayPal things. They would still come on email, and Ehsan would sit down and see what payments have come that day and load up the credits into our database for that particular user. And these calls would go through these nodes, and we would pay Imran at the end of the month. We would pay him now, right? And we kept a sliver of the margin for ourselves, and we kept it there. And it was very interesting because there's this one page where all the call logs would come, and each time you refresh it, there were 3 or 4 more calls coming. So every minute you could see more and more calls coming and this entire thing running. And we knew that there's some semblance of a business happening here. At that time, this is very unusual that Anil used to work for Ericsson, and Ericsson had a very unusual policy. Most of corporates do not, you have to sign an undertaking saying that you will not work for anybody, especially competition, etc., etc., etc. But Ericsson had this policy which encouraged people to go and also be part of other companies so that they have an in on the technology which is happening there. So that they had a very converse logic. So he actually spoke with his CEO of Ericsson, called Eric Hellstrom, saying that we've got this internet telephony thing going and a couple of phone lines happening, etc., etc. Would you be interested in this? So he said, yeah, sure, anytime. So he called me up and said, Eric Hellstrom, the big guy, he wants to talk to you. Come, let's. So I immediately landed up there. And they have a canteen where everybody is in the same canteen. So, we sat down on one thing. So I told him that this is what we are doing. So he said, I'd love to, spend some time with you. Sure. And this was somewhere in April, May. So he took out his Rolodex, an actual physical Rolodex, and went on and on, said, how about October 15th, or something, some 6 months away. I said, old man, like completely cranky fellow, he's giving me a 6-month down the line thing, and I'm here. I said, I've come from India. He said, yeah, so we'll meet in October. He shut the thing and went away. I was really, really upset. So anyhow, I came back, and it's, sorry? This is 97, I think. No, sorry, 99, yeah. So come September, I get a call from the PA of Eric Hellstrom saying that, you have an appointment in October. And, so I went in there, and this is very unusual. So he actually had a stack of printed papers. He said, I've been reading about internet and its effect, which it's going to have on telephony. And I was taking time from you to, up my speed on this, yeah. So now Eric Hellstrom and Ericsson sells these exchanges which can handle 50,000 calls at a time, right? Yeah, and and Ericsson was the world's biggest supplier of telephone exchanges and wireless infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. It had 30% of, I'm just giving you this as a background, 30% of Sweden's stock exchange value was just with Ericsson at that point in time. Okay, all right, yeah. So he said, so what's this? So I said, this is what's happening. So he said, how many lines do you have? So I said, I've got 6 lines. So he actually, he didn't mind that at all. He started writing. He said, okay, you've got 6 lines. What is your ARPU? So I said, what is ARPU? He says, average revenue per user. So I said, no idea. He said, you should know. He said, your ARPU has to go up this line. What is the loading on your line? I had no idea of what these terms were. So I said, loading, what's that? He said, no. How long out of 24 hours, how long is each of your lines busy? So, he said that. So he said, so what's your mean holding time? I mean, these are all things that I never knew of. What's the mean holding time? He said, no, how long does an average call last? What is the shortest call? What is the longest call? Are there people who are holding on to a call for hours so that others can't get through? So he actually parameterized everything that we needed to know. And he put it down into a thing, and with those 6 lines, he actually drew a quarterly balance sheet for us. He said, okay, your revenue is some, whatever, $200. So let's meet next quarter and review your performance. And he tore that piece off, and he handed it over to us. And we actually knew that we were onto a business at that point in time, right? So we came back, and we structured ourselves a little more. And we said that now anybody can download this software of the nodes and run it in their own cities. So what happened was a lot of people started calling us from the Middle East, because Middle East was one of the most expensive call rates to India, right? And Hyderabadis had Pakistani friends, so the Pakistanis said that, we'd like to call in Karachi. And they wrote to us, why aren't you giving Karachi? So we said, you ask some of your relatives to take the software, run it there, they'll also make money. So that started happening, right? So it spread to Karachi, then it spread to Philippines, Sri Lanka, a lot of places, Turkey. I didn't know this, but a lot of calling to Turkey from Europe, a lot of calling from, wherever the immigrants, so we were just following the immigrant footprints, from Mexico to California, right? So over the next year, we expanded to 23 countries. We had about 1,500 nodes operating in various parts of the world, and we were doing about 500,000 call minutes per day, okay? This is when Bharti was doing about 100 million call minutes per day. But we were we were still a 3.5-man company. I mean, Anil was working half-time because he was there. Ehsan and I were working full-time, and we had another guy called Dhyanat who went on to form the Great Hyderabad Adventure Club later on. So we started doing this. Now, the second problem which happened was that in the Middle East, we had another issue. People didn't have credit cards to pay on PayPal. So what we found out is, and there were a lot of people calling from there, so we were wondering how that is happening. And when we started checking for the PayPals, these payments are actually coming from the US. So what would happen is someone in the Middle East would have a cousin in the US who would pay for this person. So immediately we switched this, and we added a feature where you could transfer the money in your account to somebody else. Because those people said that I have one credit card and I just pay for one friend and the other friend wants it and he can't use it. So we did that. So as soon as that happened, what started happening is a business came up in the Middle East that you would have an American credit card, you'd pay on PayPal, and then you'd resell this in dirhams, the calling credits, to a lot of people. And I would go to, at times, some restaurant, and there it would say, along with your food, you'd get 10 minutes of hot phone calling, as available. So, they were going on giving this thing to us. Now, here, another very interesting thing emerged. On one hand, we had these node operators that we had to pay. And on the other hand, we had the resellers who were paying us and getting the credits. But the credits were all together in the same database, right? And because the resellers were allowed to transfer credits from one place to another, what happened is that the node operators who would actually get money for the calls that they had done would actually transfer that money directly to the reseller friends in the Middle East, and they would net off. So it became like a currency where calling credits that you would accumulate as running nodes in various cities in India and Pakistan and Philippines and Mexico City, etc., would get transferred to these resellers who were in these other countries, and they knew each other because they were the same relatives, calling and selling the credits. So it became sort of a thing that you could go to any city and sell credits. So I mean, for example, once Homer and I, we went to Dubai. I went without any money, right? So I just transferred some calling credits and, I got the money in there. As the volumes rose, our moment of, I don't know what you can call it. No, not what's the opposite of glory? Infamy was that we got mentioned in Parliament saying that, companies like these, we are on record there, are leading to a huge loss of BSNL. So at that time, in 2002, the IT Act came in, which made internet telephony legal. And when that happened, we had to close shop from India. But closing shop, there was no shop to begin with. We were just operating out of our laptops, right? We didn't have an office. We had nothing here. And we actually, and we had to do this immediately. We moved to the world's, in quotes, most taxed country, which is Sweden, because that's where Anil was sitting. And, he was there, so, overnight he could, actually, he had his father-in-law, or rather, father outlaw, because they were not really married, as he used to call my outlaws. So he had a small real estate company. So we just took over that company and, moved all this stuff there. We opened a bank account and stuff like that, and we started operating from Sweden for a while. And Anil was doing a day job with Ericsson. In the evening, he'd come back, handle these payments, etc. It was getting really, really tough for him to do that. But we were, really peaking ourselves up. But now what happened was, as the internet telephony was made illegal, the node operators were being raided. Okay? And Hyderabad, there were many of them who were arrested. They were young kids. But the thing was that being a node operator was good life. You had a PC stored away under your bed, which was connected to the internet and a phone line, and this thing was running there, and you went about with it all your life, and at the end of the month, you had about 20,000 rupees more to spend. But with this, it became extremely dangerous to be a node operator. And what would happen is, until now, telecom was regulated by the 1882 Telegraph Act, which said that if you contravened the act, you would pay a mighty fine of 150 rupees. Okay? It was never updated, because nobody ever thought that, you would have a parallel telephony system going anywhere else in the world, which would, challenge BSNL. So it was never updated. So what police did is, police started slapping cases of 420, saying that you are a telecom and this and that, etc. And there's this very interesting thing that one of the people from the vigilance cell wrote actually an email to me. he said, I know that you are the guy who's created this technology, but please stop it because a lot of young lives are being ruined because of this, and we have to go and do this. We've been asked by the government, central government, to go and raid these places and stop them. So what happened was, however, at this point in time, mobile phones had come in. And instead of landlines, these people started using prepaid phones. And that made it completely impossible for these people to be detected, right? So you never knew, you'd just go and take this, SIM and then, connect your phone to a PC, and then, you'd again do the same business. So they actually moved from landlines to this. And people who'd be arrested, they all had the entire thing worked out, that you'd be arrested, there'd be a lawyer, he'd go, he'd say, okay, 150 rupees, you go to the magistrate, you pay the 150 rupees, then you get out. But nevertheless, it was an illegal business, which is why I said that, it took me about 20 years to now tell you the story, as, keeping it all under wraps. But, it had very interesting things here, right, which emerged. One was that any technology like this which comes follows a very circuitous, erratic route to coming mainstream. I mean, Skype actually came in 2003, and we are talking about 5 years of various technology developments that took place. And I remember that in Sweden, Skype actually started in Sweden. So Anil was on board of a venture cap company where Skype had asked for funding, and they said, we are going to do a PC to PC talk software, and we require a lot of money for that. I said, that's all over and done with. We are doing PC to phone, and that's really gone. Don't even put money into this. But the other thing was that the people who would come in were these small people, like Imran I was telling you about. There were other people, kids who first come into this because of the novelty of it, because of the hack which is inbuilt into these things. And they are the ones who actually come in and also take a lot of personal risk. Now for these kids, I don't think that 15,000 rupees per month was as big as the whole thrill of actually, running something from their bedrooms which would make an impact. And there was also a lot of bragging rights to this, right? Oh, I have a node, you want to talk to, your brother, this, that, main laga ke deta hun, tu dekh kaise chalta hai, and all that. So they were mostly nerdy people. I mean, these were not people who were, illegal in terms of running mafia or hooch or gambling dens, etc. But they were people, just trying to do this small thing. The other was the sort of technological interventions which come in. For example, if we did not have the Boca modem, this wouldn't have worked. If we did not have PayPal, this wouldn't have, gone up. The fact that internet itself was there allowed us to work on this from our homes, right? We didn't require an office, we didn't require anything else. So there's this very, amusing meeting once I had with Sunil Bharti Mittal. He wanted to figure out what this is because Anil had sold stuff to him, so he knew him, so he called us over. And there we realized, he just couldn't believe that we were doing 500,000 call minutes with just 3 people. He was saying, but, where's your telephone exchange? You don't own towers? No, we don't own towers. Then he said, how is it? I said, it's working through your towers. So, yeah. It actually, but once Skype and all that came, then the good days were over. What's more is Airtel and others, BSNL themselves jumped into internet telephony, and they started selling call minutes. That's wholesale call minutes at fairly good rates. So over a period of time, we actually transitioned from buying call minutes from the node operators to actually buying it from the corporates. And the corporates had completely taken over this business at that point in time. Okay. In retrospect, I would imagine that we should have been more aggressive to, be able to, in quotes, expand, scale up, whatever the words are. But it was, the fun part was over. The fun part was over. The hack was done, and there wasn't actually more interesting things to do. And personally, I mean, I can't run big businesses. I mean, I don't remember people's name to begin with, right? I mean, that's my biggest problem, apart from a lot of other problems I have with running big businesses. So, in about year 2008, we sort of wound up the business. There were some assets of it which got sold off to a company, but that's the story I wanted to say. I don't know how intersectional it is with technology and democracy, but I thought it's a good yarn in any case. Well, actually, there were a number of things which which I thought were interesting. First is how technology has a possibility of democratizing. Okay, we didn't manage it, but there was a possibility that technology could democratize telecom. Okay, it's a lost opportunity, really, more than anything else. That's one takeaway that I have from the story. The other is that there is an invisible infrastructure which surrounds the urban, which allows you to do this, right? For example, there's this bookshop, it still exists in Mozamjai market called Paras Bookstore. And he would get the best tech books there. And that was actually a big source of everything that one could learn. For example, I remember that he had got this book called Programming Sound Blaster when Sound Blaster hadn't come to Hyderabad, right? So I went there and saw the book. Without that book, I couldn't have done it. So there are all these odd people who are working without really knowing what they're doing, but they actually help this. For example, the guy who was smuggling in these Boca modems, he was doing it for a completely different reason, but we sort of found use for that. So there are all these random things which happen, but they somehow sort of keep falling in place. So I think, my takeaway is that it's very erratic and you really don't know what you're doing until you have done it and you step out of it 15 years later and, one Sunday morning you get up and say the story. Well, there are things which happen. Most of them happen on the sidelines, but increasingly the space for adventure is shrinking really on the internet, because internet is now just 3 big companies, and it would be far more difficult to pull off a thing like HotPhone, as it was called now, than it was then. But there is still a lot of, I think, power left in a lot of peer work which can happen. Open source, for example, has, it's been corporatized, but still there is a lot of opportunity in open source. I think with the coming of mobile phones and combining them with some sort of peer network, there's still a huge possibility of a completely people's-driven network of communications, as opposed to this. So that, for example, we are looking at these internet bans, right? I hope that there's a hack and somebody takes it up and, makes it possible to provide communications without requiring an infrastructural support. Though the whole point is that there should be no central point of control, which is what the internet was supposed to be, but it has been hijacked. HotPhone, HOTFWON. It was like Hotmail, right? Hotmail was free web, so we thought we'd give free telephony, so that's how it started out. Really about half of them were Muslims. It's an interesting question. One of the reasons why a lot of Muslims came in was because they had relatives in the Middle East. Okay, so the relatives told them, why don't you do this, and you do this. So there's this very interesting, I don't know whether there's a time to say this, but and I'm probably, mischaracterizing them or, doing a hasty generalization here, but there would be one sibling left behind in Hyderabad and the other would be in the Middle East. And this person would indulge in various things and the other one would indulge him in this, right? Which is be a videographer, so get this video equipment and, for a year or two it goes on and, basically it gives him license to sleep very late in the night and, say that I was covering a wedding or whatever. Or set up a cyber booth, cafe and this and that. You see this small type of entrepreneurship which is happening quite frequently in the old city, right? This was a part of one of those things that they did, right? So, but what did happen was that there were, for example, Vijayawada and other places and Kerala, we found almost no Muslims there at all, right? In fact, predominantly Christians in the Kerala belt. And of course, outside India, there was very little, except in Turkey, of course, we had a lot of Muslims doing it. But it was basically more than being divided on religious lines, it was divided on immigrant community lines. Yeah, yeah, yeah.